Some folks will like you and some that just won't. Some that stay real and some that just don't. Trying to fit in will only take you so far. You'll never find home trying to change who you are. So don't spend your whole life trying to be what you ain't. You can't hide your heart with a new coat of paint. You think they'll accept you, I promise they can't. So just be who you are, forget what they think. So just be who you are and forget what they think.
Welcome to Vet with a Mic, content driven by veteran issues. So today we're going to have a chat with a buddy of mine from the left coast out there next to the beautiful Pacific Ocean. KP, the owner, creator, content extraordinaire for the Morning Formation podcast. How you doing today, buddy?
Doing great, Ryan. How are you?
Man, you know, I say this every time. It's going to start to become a little repetitive, but I can't complain. I'm hoping it sticks eventually, but you know, it's been a busy week. I can't really say that I have had much free time this week, but I guess I'll sleep when I'm dead, right?
Yeah, man. Free time, especially as you get older, man, I tell you, the Fridays and Saturdays come faster and faster every year. I'll be turning 42 here in February, and it's hard to believe.
I hate you so much. You're turning 42 and you look like you're 22.
Bro, I appreciate it, man. I moisturize. No, I'm just
kidding. Is that what it is? Yeah. Okay. Because I'm 37 and I look like I'm 67, right?
No, man.
No, I'm kidding. I joke. But no, I mean, you're obviously a handsome guy, clearly.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So let's talk a little bit about your time in the uniform, man. How did you arrive in the Army?
Man, that's actually a really, really interesting question. And it's something that, so it started off with my dad. My dad was drafted in 71 for Vietnam. By the time he finished Ranger school and everything, they were already sending folks back from Vietnam. So he didn't actually go. He ended up going to Germany instead once he finished Ranger school and went to commando school, went to all that high speed stuff. And he was just a kid from middle of Kentucky, didn't know what the hell he was getting into, just signed up. And actually, he was my first 3 podcast interviews that I did. And it was about his life. And I wanted to capture his stories because, you know, sooner or later, I know he's not going to be here anymore to tell his life experience in the military. And, you know, he did 20 years. So I was a military brat. I was actually born just off of Schofield in the city of Wahiawa, Hawaii, which is in the middle of Oahu. So my dad,
tough upbringing, right?
Yeah. Bro, my dad's from
paradise, right?
My dad's from Kentucky and my mom's from Hawaii. So imagine that, right?
Now the handsome genes are making more sense. All right,
dude, it was like, so I grew up half my life in Hawaii. My dad retired from the military and then ends up moving back to his state of Ohio. And I decided to move with him. And so that was a unique experience in itself, just speaking pidgin English in the islands of Hawaii to moving to the middle of Ohio, where Future Farmers of America was the hottest class that you could possibly take. I didn't, that was a huge culture shock. But
all those 4-H girls, yeah.
Right. When I actually graduated high school, man, it was, you know, my old man told me, he goes, well, you weren't smart enough. And he told me, like military style, he goes, you weren't smart enough to get a scholarship for college. So you can either stay home under my rules and go to community college, or you can go in the military. And I'm like, well, there's no way in hell I'm staying here and living by your rules because I'm 18, you know, and I want to get out of here. So I first went to the Army recruiters, was going to go active duty. And then at the last minute, one of my old football coaches got a hold of me and he said, hey, have you considered joining the Army National Guard? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. So let's talk about it. So back then, they were offering 100% tuition assistance for, you know, folks enlisting in the National Guard. I ended up doing that for about 4 years. Went to college at Wright State University right there in Dayton, Ohio. It's Wright State, wrong college, because everyone in that state is an Ohio State fan, apparently.
You're right.
And It was my sophomore, junior year. I decided that I wanted to take the next step, and I joined the ROTC program through the SMP Green to Gold program. So I went from being a corporal in the Army National Guard to a cadet. And I would go to it was kind of strange because I would still go to my unit, and instead of wearing enlisted rank, I would wear like this little circle. And the day that I graduated with my bachelor's degree was the day that I pinned on my second lieutenant rank, and I was stationed back in my original home state of Hawaii with 25th. I was originally branched as an ordnance officer, but as it turns out, once I went into the military, I ended up in transportation for the most part of my career. Went to my officer basic course, and then after that, went to Hawaii. Found out, 30 days later, I was going to deploy to Iraq, which was surprising. This was in 2000.
Surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, this is in
Welcome.
2004.
Yeah.
It was 2004, and the thing that really annoyed me was the fact that I didn't know until I landed in Hawaii, and then they're like, "Hey, in 30 days you got to deploy," and I was like, "Okay, so here we go." And so, less than a year out of college, I find myself Operation Iraqi Freedom, 2004, right after Fallujah. The year before, I am sort of distantly cousins with Wesley Batalona. He is one of the Blackwater contractors that was ambushed in Fallujah and was dragged to the streets. And so, all these things were going through my mind at the time when I was deploying. Wesley had actually worked with my father up at East Range at the pre-ranger course. My dad knew him really well. And so here I am. I'm going into the frying pan. I'm going to Iraq as a 24-year-old second lieutenant. And it was quite an experience in itself. My first platoon that I ever was a platoon leader for was a transportation platoon. From that deployment, I earned a Bronze Star, which is back here. And that's truly not my award. That's the award that my platoon earned. And when I went there, I didn't know what I was doing. I really heavily relied on my NCOs, my squad leaders, to get me through some of the tougher missions that we did. Our job was to basically go from base to base, carrying supplies, personnel, prisoners, anything up in the Mosul area. So I did that, came back from my deployment, and got promoted to eventually I got promoted to first lieutenant when I was in Iraq. Then I got promoted to captain. So just before I went to my commander's course, I decided to get out. And when I got out, I was part of the S3. I was a training officer for our battalion, which was an awesome experience itself. So, in a bottle, in a nutshell, that's pretty much my military experience in itself.
Yeah. So that's a lot of experience there. So let's talk a little bit. When you say that what was your main tasking in Iraq then? You're doing convoys, but a lot of people don't really know how dangerous that shit actually is.
And until you mentioned to me the other day, because I told you, I said, well, I just did convoys. Yeah. It is dangerous. It's a dangerous job. Like, is it as dangerous as some of the guys that are kicking doors down, going door to door? I don't know, probably not. But we did see a lot of action, and we talked about that in our other podcast, where I get that question from civilians. Well, did you see a lot of action? And it's something that I have trouble answering, because it's subjective to who you are. Like, if you're a civilian, yeah, hell yeah, there's a lot of action. But since I was a platoon leader, I was in charge of managing the platoon, which is something that people don't think about a lot. When we went outside the wire, when we went off base to do our convoys, that was the mission. We had to get from point A to point B as safely as possible, as fast as possible, with all of our stuff intact. But a lot of people don't think about this. There was a lot of times where I would come back from those missions and I was already, at full stress, full anxiety, everything. And then I would come back onto the base and then have to manage a platoon. So if I had a specialist who was going through a divorce at the time, was having child support issues, was having
Right.
issues with family. Like I had to go and help that soldier, and it's something that squad leaders, everyone in leadership, because you're a leader 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop as soon as we come back into the wire. So there was a lot of times I felt like my most important job, aside from being a convoy commander and leading, the platoon from point A to point B, which I heavily depended on my E4s and my squad leaders and my NCOs to make that happen. And I'll explain that in a second. But my most important job was making sure that people's welfare was at its best that it could be. So
Yeah.
having those counseling conversations with folks, who are having problems at home, was something that I tried to support as a platoon leader. And then also on the other side of it too, at night when we typically did convoy, I had to do the convoy briefs, the operations orders. I had to make sure that I had the trucks lined up. So it was a constant like year of like no slowing down, man. And there was many times where like I would just go to my room, which was an old Iraqi store that I just
Sure.
literally gutted out and made it my own because it was concrete. And then just in case any rockets or
Right.
mortars would come in, I took over this concrete Iraqi store. I would go into that room, man, and I would just freaking melt. Like 24 years old, and I'm literally counseling a 35-year-old man on having marriage issues and complications at home, and I'm trying to help them keep their head in the game because tonight we got a convoy going on. So, man, I feel like that year really took a lot of years off of me for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Stress is cumulative, right? Most of my clinical research at this point, I've spent immersed within the clinical literature of stress. And there's two things that you mentioned that just kind of queued up with me is home front stressors, which is what they're termed within the clinical literature for these stressors that are outside of the deployment, these everyday commitments that we have to meet, being a husband, being a wife, being a father, being a mother. Those actually don't leave you whenever you go downrange. You take them with you. And we kind of get stuck in these cycles of you come back from a deployment and you have no reprieve. You go right back into filling those obligations again, and you carry them with you downrange too. So it's funny. I'd say funny, but more ironic. I always hoped that leadership actually actively thought about those kind of things, how they undermined our performance if our head's not right, if we're having problems back home, because it's hard to, just focus and concentrate if we have all those things just kind of floating inside, and they do affect our operational effectiveness. I take some solace there knowing that you struggled with that over and over again, that was actually your most difficult burden to carry, if I may be so frank. Let me ask you this: did you have a family at this point? Did you have a significant other?
Yeah, so I did, but I didn't have any kids
Mm,
at the time. So that was another thing too, was actually identifying with what some of the soldiers were going through. And it truly was, if you had somebody within your ranks that was going through a terrible divorce, terrible situation, whatever it was, you also took that on too. Like you felt
mm,
like you were a part of that because you sat there with them
mm.
and heard their stories and then just tried to come up with solutions as best you could with basically what you had. So
Yeah. So it's ironic to me that I was also fresh out of basic at 24, and you're fresh out of your officer school at 24. And how different our experiences truly were from that perspective of having to grow up really quickly. Because 24, people think like that's as a grown up, but man, you're not really. You're not really. And I was an E2, E3 at the time. And here you are as an O2, O1, O2. and you're having to be a leader of men. That must have been a colossal weight to bear at such a young age. And do you mind if we talk about the conversation you said that you had during a convoy, that somebody was in the vehicle with you? They said, "Is it like this every day?" Can you tell that
Yeah.
story?
Yeah, definitely. And there's so many things that could be taken out of my deployment that I still
Mhm.
think about and I still use today as a teaching point, for life. And it was funny because we would constantly be on the road every single night. And so that was our reality. Our reality
Mhm.
was IEDs, our reality was RPGs, our reality was vehicle breakdowns and the potential of getting ambushed,
Mhm.
and then we had other little stupid things that happened where uh we would drive through the city, and then I remember there was this we would drive through the city, and there would be these buildings that were really close to us, and they would just find little things to screw with us and mess with us. And one of the things I'll mention real quick that some people don't even think about was they would take a cord and they would wrap it to something and tie it to something on one side of one building, throw it over to another building, and as our convoys would pass under this cord, they would drop it down and try to basically snag the gunners. And
Mm.
so every night, like, we dealt with these types of things aside from the small arms fires and the daisy chained IEDs and shit. And my platoon, we were used to it. Like, we were no stranger to it. And there was one night we were driving through Talafar, and I was in charge of a convoy. And you got to imagine, some of our convoys were like 50 trucks, 60 trucks. I
Mm.
mean, long. And you've got you've got army gun trucks, which usually have 50 cal 249 crew serve weapons mounted to them. So those were
Mhm.
the gun trucks protecting convoys. And then in between those gun trucks, you had civilian trucks that were carrying supplies,
Mhm.
and they were carrying prisoners or people. So we were driving to the city of Talafar, and it was, of course, there was a certain time frame where we expected to get contact every single time we drove through this city. It was part of the thing. And we were driving to the city, and here I am. I'm like so consumed in my little box, sitting on the passenger side of this Humvee. I've got my driver, and I've got my 50 cal gunner on top in the turret. And I'm like double stack Singar radio. I'm contacting the local, which is, I think, third armored cav. And then I'm also contacting the aviation element. And then I've got this MTS system in front of me. I'm typing back to my headquarters, letting them know what's going on. We're in the middle of a firefight right now. Like, there's
Mm.
insurgents on one side, and then there's 3rd ACR on the other side. And it was crazy. It was crazy, right? But I wasn't thinking about it at the time. And I was just focused on, okay, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. And in the back seat, we had a captain that was sitting back there, and he was just a passenger going from Mosul, going to Sykes, which was in
Mhm.
Talafar, Fob Sykes. And in the middle of all this going on, tracer rounds flying past our window. You can hear like bullets hitting the side of our Humvee, and it's just it's mad crazy. And I remember looking up once, and I saw a 50 cal gunner on the back of an M1, and he was literally shooting between our convoy intervals.
Mm.
So we have like 100, 200 feet or feet between us, or yards or whatever, and boom, boom, like he would start laying down fire and then stop in between, like while the trucks were running. So all this is going on, and I'm trying to like manage this convoy. And
Sure.
the captain in the back seat, like he just simply said, he said, "Holy shit, LT, is it like this every night?" And that statement, amidst of everything that was happening at that time, it made me pause. It made me pause for a second, and I was sort of like, yeah. And then
Mm.
it made me think too, like, this isn't everyone's reality. Like,
Yeah.
this is our reality. This is my reality. Like, this is
Right.
what it is like for me every night. So it was kind of interesting to have that experience, to have that happen. And it seems very insignificant, very small, but it was kind of like one of those moments that I just took a tactical pause, and I was like, it's not like this for everyone.
Yeah. That was definitely an epiphany moment, right?
Yeah.
That was, yeah. We've framed it this way a few times on the podcast. Is you're cursed and blessed within the same breath. And a lot of times, whenever you're downrange, at least that's the way I felt. We would be in some beautiful terrain, but at the same time, it's just there were moments of just sheer chaos that would often accompany. So let's move into what your life was like after the uniform. So you chose to get out in what year?
I got out in 2000 at the end of 2007 was when I got out.
2007.
Yeah.
So what did I mean? Because you kind of you want to talk about a pretty difficult transition. Potentially, you got out into the recession. So that's what you're telling me,
I
right?
did. I
So
did.
how did that work?
So it was quite stressful actually, because while I was gone, my now ex-wife had purchased a house, and that was probably the worst time you could purchase a house.
Right.
I ended up having to short sell it, and so that was a stress aside from coming back from a war and getting out of the military itself. I had to figure out, how am I going to afford this thing. I tried to rent it out, and the how that recession you're talking about, it didn't just affect home owners and
Right.
buyers, but it affected the rental market too, really bad,
Sure. Yeah.
especially in Hawaii, where they were getting rid of the sugarcane fields and actually building. So there was like new construction all the time, and it was really unique in itself. But once we got past that, um, finding a job was really really difficult, and it was because I was sort of my own worst enemy. I did not seek all the help that I should have sought back then, and it's my own fault. I, like many other service members out there, was very stubborn. I thought that I knew how to do my own resumes. I thought I knew how to network. I thought I knew everything, and I really didn't. And in 2007, I always say this, like, there was no LinkedIn, there was no Facebook.
Right.
It was MySpace. That was the sexiest thing, like, on
Right. Yeah.
social media, was
I
MySpace.
remember. Yeah.
And most people were putting their own music on there and own little
Yeah.
graphics and
Yeah. Yeah.
dumb shit. It was like it wasn't even a thing you could professionally use. So yeah, back then, I decided to go with a headhunter to help me find a job. It's one of those headhunters where you sign up with them and then they connect you with these big companies, and you spend like 2 or 3 days, where the first day you practice interviewing and they go over your resume, and then the second and third day you sit down with all these different companies and you basically just interview for a job. And I thought that's really all I needed. And after those several days of interviews, I had several companies that were still on the table. But then when it was all said and done, there was only one company that was willing to offer me a job, and it was in Indianapolis, and it was Rolls Royce. And that the HR generalist at the time, she was great. She was basically like pro military, had so much success with military in the past. And the problem was, when they hired 7 military officers from different branches, they brought us in, took us in basically through the doors. We're in there now. They really didn't know what to do with us. A lot of us ended up in positions that no one else really wanted. So, for example, the position I ended up in, I was 27 at the time, and I was a departmental supervisor for Rolls-Royce, which is, in aeronautics. And they put me in a department that literally, I think in the next year and a half, 2 years, they knew that all their work was going to get outsourced, and this was a union shop. So it's very different when you're going from the military to managing a union. There's a lot of
Right.
rules that you got to understand, but then also too, there's also the morale portion of it too. Like, you've put me in charge of folks that literally know they've been doing this job for 15, 20 years, and now they know that in a year and a half or so, their jobs are going to be outsourced, and they don't even know where they're going to be after that.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Me and a buddy were just talking about something similar to this, because there's all these books that focus in on, like, they use military motifs to describe leadership within the workplace, but military leadership, or I would say, the military structure doesn't exactly map one to one directly onto corporate structure, because, like you just alluded to, unions have a lot of power. They have labor has quite a bit of a say, unlike the enlisted ranks that we just execute. That's all we do. and we don't really have much of a choice but to just follow orders. So I've always been confused, and I don't understand when the trend happened to start using these military like terms and applying them to business, because that really they're two way different concepts, the social scripts within those two spheres couldn't probably be further apart from each other.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I'm not sure if it was your podcast. Somebody had mentioned that where to get away from the idea of applying military to the same script of being a civilian. And I think that was the problem in itself, was that they really didn't know what an army captain was.
Mm.
And so to some extent, I think they kind of thought we were drill sergeants or something, and we were gonna whip these guys into shape and make them do work. But
Right.
I wanna say this, like, while I was there, I did run into some people who are very, very helpful, and
Mhm.
and some of the management there, they were great. They did their best to actually to to bring us along, but at the
Right.
end of the day, it was just not a good fit. Like, there wasn't the type of training to help us translate our skills over and really fully use us for the value
Mhm.
that we really were for. And my department was actually really, really good. I mean, the guys that worked for me, they watched out for me. Like,
Right.
and I learned early on too, like, I was in my own cubicle, right? Moving something that I wanted to move, like I think it was a filing cabinet or something, and then somebody wrote me up for taking somebody else's job. So there was
Mhm.
a lot of weird
Yeah.
stuff like that that happened, but for the most part, man, my guys really took care of me. They liked me a lot. One of the things that I did as a supervisor for them was whenever I would encounter an issue, I would reach back to my military experience,
Mhm.
and I would have a morning meeting, and I would talk about all the metrics and everything and just see how everyone's doing, typically like we would do for a morning formation, right?
Right.
And and some of the things I would do is I would actually try to use an experience that I had in the military to what we were doing at the shop at that time. So for example, there was one time, I was getting this pushback where, well, that's not my job.
Mhm.
And so I took a military experience that I had where I could have easily applied that's not my job to what we were doing and overall accomplishing the mission.
Right.
So I was able to reach back, even though I didn't know technically what they were doing, I was able to reach back into my leadership experience and kind of provide that as a way to get them to understand where I was coming from.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, there's tons of opportunities to extract our unique perspectives from the uniform and apply them to different settings. But you just have to be cognizant that that's what you're doing. Uh, Something that we run into sometimes too is like when we'll try to put out information and we'll send out a mass email. Well, we'll find that a lot of people disregard the mass emails. And then I try to explain this to civilian people, like, well, listen, um, military members, prior service guys and gals are so used to disregarding command level emails that they're not opening them at all. I promise you. Um, because morning formation, anything that's in that email is about to be talked about, like by your immediate supervisor. They're going to digest it and put it out to you in person. And I think it's interesting that one of the things that I think we vets struggle with is, like we've talked about, is not understanding that the expectations for the environment or for the situation are going to be a little different. As a worker or as a leader, you're going to have to um, change how you approach the problem, because I could imagine that being a veteran leader for from the officer perspective is sometimes, if you talk to people the way you do from the uniform, they'll be like, wow, that guy's condescending, or man, why does he talk to me like I'm an idiot? Just because we're so used to kind of dealing with the lowest common denominator that doesn't really apply well to the majority of workplace settings.
No, it doesn't at all. It doesn't work. And I think I talked about this before, but I spoke to Donnell Johns, who is from Veterans Grow America, and he
Mhm.
talked about he's a retired sergeant major, Army sergeant major, and he
Mm.
talked about using soft skills to
Yeah.
train.
Now, tell me what soft skills are, because you mentioned this to me in a conversation, and I just kind of went, "Oh, okay," but I had no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, soft skills are more of those skills that you would utilize to like a hard skill would be like you more or less having the attitude of do it because I said so. Whereas
Mm,
like a soft skill would be explaining things thoroughly
mm,
and making sure that your entire team understands why you're doing it versus do it because I told you so.
got it. Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's definitely more effective
Yeah.
to at least to get people to comply with requests if they understand the nature of their request versus just because I said so. That
Right.
doesn't, I mean, that really, in the psychological literature we call that reactance. When somebody tries to tell you, then they try to alter your behavior in some way and you're aware of it, you have the tendency to kind of psychologically kind of bow up, like, I'm not going to do that. And it's an exaggerated response. Even within the research, whenever you see, they'll take something as silly as they'll set the aisles of a grocery store to a certain limit. And then they'll say, here, you can pick any type of candy bar you want. There's three options. When people have a wide enough space, they pick three candy bars from the same pot, whichever one that they like the most. But when they adjusted the aisles and made them more narrow, people then, through reactance, said, I'm going to choose one of each of the piles. And it's just because it's a physiological response. People are not, there's a perceived constraint that somebody in power is putting on you, and you bow up. Teenagers are notorious for this, obviously. If you try to tell them to do something, they're going to do the exact opposite just because you told them to do it, right?
That's interesting, man.
It is, man. It is so, human beings are just so fascinating, man. And we learn more every day about behaviors.
I
It
tell
is
you what,
so
man,
crazy.
I'm really glad that we connected because you have a lot of very in-depth knowledge, and of course because your background in education from Middle Tennessee State University, man, a lot of it is applicable, and you understand that application
Yeah.
when it comes to the
Yeah.
military. That's the best thing about all this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Oh, so let's talk. I appreciate the compliment, but I shy away from attention. But let's talk about the morning formation, because that is how you and I really our paths intersected. Because I found you on Instagram, and I was like, man, this guy's doing a lot of cool stuff. Like, I feel like a low rent operation compared to him. So let's talk about the morning formation podcast and how you got that started.
Oh, brother, you actually got my attention because of your logo and some of the postage. I'm like, man, this guy's got a great start to his podcast. I kind of figured you would start it because just based off the amount of posts that you've done,
Mm,
but you caught my attention actually. And the Morning Formation podcast, I started it because this entire time I've wanted to do sort of what I did when I was a lieutenant in the
mm,
military, when I was a captain in the military, which is mentor. I
right.
miss having that that effect, that being able to reach out, being able to mentor folks. We don't do it enough in society in
Mm,
general. Whenever I do it, people around me are like, "What are you doing?" Like, what are you not doing? Like, why are you not talking to this person about the trade that
mm,
they're in or the trade that they want to get into and help them out? Like, why are you not doing that? Like, because one of the things that I did when I was a lieutenant was I really impressed upon the folks that were in my platoon to go to the education center. When we came back from
mm,
Iraq, that was the number one thing was I was like, look, don't spend your Friday, Saturday nights going to the bars, strip joints, or anything like that. Go to the education center so that in a couple years when you get out, you're going to have something to show for your overall sacrifice of even
mm,
being here. And so, and what I just talked about with my transition, I quit that job after the first year. Like I
mm,
quit working at that job. I mean, it was a good paying job, and there were people there that were trying to be helpful, and it's a good company, but it just wasn't a good fit for me. And it was really, really frustrating for me during that transition process. And if I can figure out a way as a civilian right now at 41 years old to somehow create a platform, a listening or visual platform to help out current service members or veterans out there that are kind of that it kind of needs some assistance, then why not? And so the Morning Formation podcast, the name of it itself, you know, in the military, we've done a lot of shit that like we hated like
Yeah. Yeah.
PT, you know, in boot camp, basic training. We could talk about all that shit, right? That we did. The morning formation, I'm not a morning person. I hated morning formation, but
Make
at the
that
end of
two of us. Yeah.
dude, at the end of the day, that was the one time that we all got together and we got to see each other's faces after a long weekend. And then shortly after that, we would go on a long ass run that sucked. And then afterwards, we were like patting each other on the back and, you know, that building that camaraderie. Cause a lot of times nothing builds that more than dealing with the suck, you know, dealing
Right.
with going through shit. So that's why I called it the Morning Formation Podcast, because it's a place where people can come together and get information on transitioning, whether that be the mental transition of it or the educational transition of it, career transition of it. This is a place where folks can come, service members, military spouses, veterans can come and listen in, get that information, and hopefully level themselves up, because that's what it's all about. You know, when I got out in 2007, there wasn't a whole lot of help, you know, for me. Like I had to go with this headhunter, and you know, in today's world, we have all these social platforms and whatnot. Like let's take advantage of it and try to help each other out.
Yeah, you're right. Because it is so much easier to connect and form new resources post, almost said post surgery, post service, because this really people and relationships, as we've kind of talked about before, are synergistic and they're a force multiplier. So everybody that you know, by us connecting, now I know, and vice versa. And that is really how you get things done. That's how you get things done, is to utilize the amount of social capital you have at your disposal. And I don't think we veterans do that enough, because we're only 8% of the US population. But of that 8%, if there, it doesn't matter if it's video production or, you know, whatever it's construction, whatever it is, we have a contact in that sphere, and they're going to be a person who knows how to get something done within that domain. So just connecting with each other and utilizing the social capital we have from the uniform is vital to success. It will multiply the amount of opportunities you have for success, because opportunities begot more opportunities. One door opens and it opens up another series of doors behind that. All you have to do is walk through the door. And that's a lot of times what social capital is. Connections turn into more opportunities. And I think we don't utilize that as a resource enough. Maybe it's because we feel uncomfortable. We don't like to ask for things. And maybe we don't like to take credit for how much capital that we actually have to offer. But I think that's one of the things that can really help ease the burden of transition, is just utilizing people. I will go out of my way to help another veteran. And that is something that is really powerful. We would be foolish not to utilize that.
Yeah, and I made a big mistake. When I first got out, I literally wanted to get out. Like I wanted to not even identify as a veteran. I didn't go to the VA. I took all my stuff and I literally put it in boxes. Like, I don't know, you can't probably see it back here, but I have a piece of det cord, was the first IED that I ever ran over. And I took that det cord and the little write up for it and everything, because I got a combat action badge for that. It was I took all that shit. I took my Bronze Star, everything. I threw it all in a tub and I shut the tub and I was like, I won't, I'm done. Like I'm not in the military anymore. I want to move on. And as hard as I tried to just fit in with everyone else, with the 95% or 93% of the world, of the US population that never
Yeah.
served. I never did. And
Mm.
I really missed my military comrades. I missed the people that I served with, and I always had a special place in my heart for people that were going in the military, because I understood that sacrifice, man.
Mm.
Like, even when I left college and I got stationed with 25th, I was just talking with someone about this the other day. It kind of sucked because I was in Iraq at the time, and when I came back, I reconnected with some of my friends from college, and I'm like, "So what have you guys been doing?" And they're like, "Oh, just hanging out, chilling, just hanging out, broke up and I started dating this girl again. And I broke up with her again, and they're just living life, man." And I'm like, shit, I've been in Iraq, dodging bullets for the last year or so, and you guys haven't been doing anything. So always a special place in my heart for people that just simply serve, even if you don't go to combat and you just,
Right.
you get plucked from your comfort zone and placed somewhere else, and you're forced to work with all these other people. And man, I'm really happy to be back at the table again, and also be talking to folks like yourself, because this is, like you mentioned in the other podcast, you mentioned, filling your cup. Like, this is where I can actually feel like, I identify, with.
I guess we kind of buried the lead there. I should have mentioned this before. Like, this has been a two-part conversation, reciprocal. So I was interviewed on the Morning Formation podcast, and now you're being interviewed on Vet with a Mic. So I want to really want people to be cognizant of that. There's some great content that's going to be obviously on both platforms here, and I almost feel like we're doing a disservice, even not just releasing them both together, because it was a great experience for me on your show, and I hope you're feeling the same about this one.
Yeah, man.
But we talk a lot about not feeling connected to people after the uniform, because you're right. Like, your college buddies have no frame of reference to what that's like, not at all. And I mentioned even just going on leave and going back home and talking to people that I've known my entire life. They might as well have been strangers to me. I felt as if they had no connection to me anymore. I couldn't relate to them anymore. They were talking about, well, yeah, we're hanging out. We're going down to, the local gin joint. We're going to be doing this. And I just kind of went, how boring. I don't really relate to that at all. Like,
Right.
I can't, you and I aren't the same people anymore.
Right.
And it wasn't them that had changed. It was I had changed so much. Even within that first year of the uniform, I couldn't relate to him anymore. And I underestimated how different I was going to be just within that first year. Because we talked about on your show, I was just from this small town in East Tennessee, and everything that I thought was big about the world suddenly got a lot smaller.
Yeah.
Because now I had gone from this little bitty town in East Tennessee, and we went to Chicago area for 2 months for basic training. Then I went to San Antonio for 2 months for A school. Then I was in San Diego for 2 months for iStop. And then I was overseas going to mobile security, Det Bahrain, and I was there for the next 2 years. And I went from Djibouti to Crete to, I transiting through the Straits of Hormuz and transiting through the Suez Canal. I had been and seen so much of the world in a really short period of time. It was really hard to connect and understand people whenever I went, man, you guys have no idea how rough the world is. You're wrapped in your little cellophane security blanket here, and you have no idea of what Eastern Africa is like. You have no idea of how the rest of the world struggles, and that is an alienating feeling to be to understand just how different you are compared to your peers now.
Yeah, man. Everything from geography to the cultures to politics to understanding the way things work. I mean, we live in a society today, man, where people watch, just a short video, and then they think they fully understand, what it's like, and they don't have any fucking clue like what it's like.
Yeah.
It's just like, it can be frustrating at times, where we go back to talking about, getting those crazy questions about, well, did you see any action type stuff? Well,
Mhm.
it's not like the movies, man. Like, not everyone sees action. You don't have to see action, really. You just
Right.
got to be around it. And not only that, but you know the sacrifices that are made just from the military in general
Yeah.
is something that is to be highly commended itself.
And even if you are working as a cook in Iraq,
Hmm.
damn it, you're still a cook in Iraq.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like what frame of reference does the jackass down the street who's asking you about it? How does he? Who the hell are they to even ask that question?
yeah,
Like, who are they? And
yeah,
I think it really does. It hits us like a ton of bricks a lot, because then we feel as if we're put upon. We have to justify what we did to who? To somebody who has no frame of reference for it from the very beginning, anyway.
yeah,
So you're not. That's a lose-lose situation for you. If you say, "Oh no, I didn't see any combat," then what do? Well, then you didn't do anything, right? And if you say yes, they look at you like you're some kind of psycho killer. It is really a lose-lose situation for veterans, and I would really implore civilians out there, please stop putting people in those positions. You want to help with the 22 a day? Stop asking jackassy questions, please,
yeah,
because it undermines our self-efficacy and how we feel about the quality of our service, and it really does some real harm. Now, not to everybody. A lot of us appreciate it, and that's okay. But just stop it with it, please. I know that sounds a little preachy, but it's a jackassy question, and we all have had experiences with it, and it just needs to stop.
yeah. I can tell you that for a number of years, going back to, like, just telling you that story that I talked about earlier, where the captain was just sitting in the back seat and he just said, "Holy shit, LT, is it like this every night?" Um, I didn't tell that story for a really long time. I didn't tell any
Mm,
stories at all, because going back to a time of your life that was full of stress, anxiety, and unknowns
mm,
isn't fun. Like, it's not
yeah,
something that I enjoy for a number of years talking about. And only until I started, seeking counseling and started, understanding myself a little more and opening
yeah.
myself more, did I become more comfortable with sharing some of those experiences, because I look at those experiences as having more of a life teaching point.
Mm.
And there's so many more, and I'm sure you have a ton as well that you can talk about, and over the span of your podcast, you definitely share that type of stuff, because those nuggets of experience and teaching points could be of value to someone out there.
So a lot of times we talk a lot about finding meaning in life after the uniform. So I've started to gather there's a recurring theme with you. So if you look at the book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about finding purpose or a meaning in life through three avenues: contending with a worthwhile goal, connecting with other people, or works of art. So, sounds like the one that you really circle in on is the people element. You like to mentor, you like to be heavily involved in people's lives and their growth, which can be remarkably intrinsically rewarding because you're not getting anything out of it. I mean, it's the joy, it is its own sense of joy to mentor another person. And do you know anything about Stoicism at all?
No.
So I'm a Stoic. It's the ancient Greek philosophy. Marcus Aurelius was a Stoic. He's one of the more famous ones. But in Stoicism, we talk about having mentors. We talk about setting goals and aiming yourself towards somebody who's already completed that set goal. So if I wanted to be, I don't know, a real estate agent, what I would want to do is I would want to find the best real estate agent that I could and model myself after them. So it sounds like your mentor, um, your mentor inclination is that same stoic drive. You want to provide a sounding board for people to utilize models that you have found successful, not just for your life, but for the lives of others. And that is a profoundly meaningful pursuit to have in one's life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that. I There's a lot of things that I wish I would have had that I didn't have, and that mentoring, whether it be career or personal, was something that I
Mm,
missed out on. My dad was just he was my mentor up to a certain point, and he still is my mentor today. But he never was commissioned, never went through college. He never,
mm,
went to war, things like that. So he did his best, but I really missed out on a lot of mentoring when it came to making the most effective decisions. I kind of
mm,
had to go the long way around to get where I was going to go. And there's really no reason for that. And I am extremely proud. They always say that if you're speaking to a room of 40 people, if you're able to get through to two of them, then
mm.
that's success.
Yeah.
And that's what I experienced as a platoon leader. I would stand in front of my platoon and I would talk about the education center and talk about all these important things that they should be doing. And there was really only a few that actually took me up on the offer that I know of. One of them was
Well, we
a
enlisted guys are a stubborn bunch, though. Yeah.
and that was the thing too. Like, I was, had been through basic. I was enlisted, in the
Yeah.
National Guard, but not active
Right.
duty. And so there's um one person that had worked for me as an E4, and it was when I was working in the battalion and I was a captain. And I would tell him, like, at the time he was going through some difficult personal things with
Mm,
he'd gotten in a little bit of trouble with the command or whatever. And but he was a hard worker. Like, I saw a lot
right.
of things in him. I was like, damn, he's got some attributes. And so
Mm,
I would talk to him about, hey, you really need to take into consideration, getting your bachelor's degree and climbing this ladder, making something of yourself. And so I talked to him and got him motivated to go seek out some life goals. And so he went to the education center. Long story short, he went from being an E4 to getting his commission. And then after that, after he got his commission, he got out and he is now a practicing attorney in the state of New York. And so he got his Juris Doctorate, passed the bar, the whole 9 yards. And that's what I like to see. Like, I didn't get
yeah.
anything out of being part of his journey. Like, I was one of many people that helped, push him into that direction. And I'm proud of myself to
Yeah.
say, and I'm honored that he views me as someone who was part of his life journey, because even the day that I die, I'd like to think that, he'll think about that, and I'll also think about that too, like,
Mm,
that I had something to do with someone else's success to make tomorrow better.
mm,
And so that's what it's all about, man. It's all about leadership and mentoring. And so, that's hopefully something that we can do with the Morning Formation podcast, is getting the listeners out there to hear someone, identify with them, and understand that just because you're an E4 or an E3 or whatever, lower enlisted military,
mm.
doesn't mean that you can't someday be a doctor or be a PhD or be an attorney. Like, it's truly up to you. Like,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I really, I think, enjoy the most about doing what I do with the Morning Formation podcast.
Yeah. And that is profound. Um, we often get so caught up in the large goal seems so unattainable that we lose perspective that it's just a series of baby steps, man. Successive approximations. That's what we call it in our biz. It's just a series of small alterations that cumulatively lead to this potential outcome. And one of the hardest things, as Joel, one of our other interviews, talked about, is the first step is the hardest. And if you can really just utilize somebody's encouragement early on and make that first step, you're well on your way. That's the first step is the hardest. And I too take a lot of joy in encouraging others in whatever pursuit in which they are on, because it takes so much effort to just make that first step that I want to provide them with as much ancillary courage as I can. I'll cheerlead the hell out of you, just as long as you're making those baby steps to whatever ultimate goal you want to make. And that builds your own self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, as we've talked about before, is just generally speaking your belief that you can handle whatever the environment throws at you. But it's like a muscle, self-efficacy has to be built. You have to make those little baby steps, those little victories to the point where you're just like, you know what? I can handle this. I can do this. And I kind of get the vibe that is one of the things that you really enjoy is ushering those people through that process of helping them go to the gym of self-efficacy and really make those strides towards whatever they want to be in life.
Simply believe in yourself and understand that you were built for greatness. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what I used to, when we used to go on those long runs, man, that's what one thing I would tell people. I was like, you got to believe in yourself. It's 7 a.m. in the morning and you're running 6 miles, you're running 8 miles, whatever the case is. And you got to believe today that you were made for greatness, and just try to say those things that motivate people and get them to understand their own value. A lot of people out there make sacrifices for you. Whether it was your mom, dad, uncle, aunt, whatever the case is, teacher, a lot of people go out there and go out of their way to make sacrifices to take you where you are. So if you're 20 years old and you find yourself standing in formation in uniform, there was people along your life that made small sacrifices and big sacrifices to get you there. And you definitely want to reach back and make them proud and make their sacrifices worth their time. And, that was one thing that I always believed in myself too.
Yeah. And, we talked about this on your show, is gratitude for those people is truly it is a force multiplier. Yet I keep using this word, showing that gratitude to the people who have impacted your life reinforces the idea that more people are going to show an interest in your life as well. And it really reframes how you perceive the world. It puts the focus on just being grateful for the experiences that you have versus feeling as if you were owed those experiences. And those things that really does go a long way for psychological health, is just understanding that you're grateful for the opportunities which you have in life versus, oh, well, here we go again. I guess I'll do this again. Instead of I know it's cliche. I know it is, but I get to do this versus I have to do this. And it is, it really is psychologically powerful. Yeah.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you on that.
So I think that's a good place to call it. Is there anything else that we didn't get to? Let's plug your show as much as we can here, though, right?
Oh, yeah. So themorningformation.com is my main website. You can find me on Instagram under the Morning Formation Podcast. You can find me. I'm like you. I try to be on every platform. I think I'm not on Discord or Twitch. I haven't figured those two out yet. But
me either. Yeah.
I'm on TikTok. I'm mainly on Instagram, though. You can find me on LinkedIn too. I have the Morning Formation Podcast on there, as well as my own LinkedIn, which is under KP Phillips. Link up with me on there. But if you want to find all that stuff, just go to the Morning Formation, themorningformation.com, and all the links will be on there as well.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you know who your next interview is going to be?
So I have a couple interviews tomorrow, actually. Ooh. And so I'm focused on tomorrow. I'm going to be talking to a military spouse who's going to be her main topic is going to be focused on entrepreneurship for military veterans. And so she's got a, I don't know what it is. It's like a saying. It's called focus. And so she's going to go into detail about what focus, FOCUS, stands for. And her name's Lepora Lindsay.
Okay.
So I was on Clubhouse for a while. I actually used to host a room every Friday until my schedule got wacky. And it was called MilPact and the military mix-up specifically. And it was every Friday. So I got a lot of connections on there when I used to moderate that room. So yeah. So
Nice. Yeah. So I actually this week we have a conversation coming up with a power lifter and someone who has found meaning in life after the uniform through the sport of powerlifting. And we also have an actor by the name of Graham who's going to be stopping by this week, and he's going to talk about what it's like working in the movie biz. He has a movie that is just came out or is about to come out. We'll find out more details this week. But as you all know, we have been talking with KP, the founding member and extraordinaire of the Morning Formation podcast. His stuff is great. His content is remarkably enjoyable for all of us nerds out there who find it. If you would like to know more about KP, obviously find his podcast on the locations in which we just talked about. If you're out there and you've enjoyed listening to this conversation, please spread the word to others, because we largely are relying upon the word of mouth of our listeners kind of going out there and spreading the good word about what we're doing here to help as many people as possible in their pursuits of life after the uniform. If you know anybody out there who would be a great interview, please hit me up on our social media accounts, wherever you may find them, or you may find me at ryan@vetwithamic.com if you want to email me directly. But
Ryan, thank you
yeah,
so much, man, for having me on the show, man. This is honestly the best communicative interview that I've ever had before. So I appreciate you, man.
oh,
Thank
that
you
is
so much.
fantastic, man.
Yeah.
I'm humbled for you to say that, honestly.
No, I mean it.
We're gonna be doing some more work together.
Oh, we'll
So
be doing a lot of work together,
yeah.
man. I definitely need to link back up with you and do some more collab work, because you are a wealth of knowledge, and I feel like I've spoken to you for a few hours today, and like I've already learned so much. So I appreciate this.
Well, back at you, buddy. Like I every single time we've talked so far, I leave going, man, I feel refreshed from talking to that guy. Right?
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. Let's
All
do
right,
it.
y'all. So stand by for more KP in the immediate future. But as always, however life finds you, I hope life finds you well. Till next time.